In 1928, a new era began at Springfield as Boyce Smith was hired as the new coach for the Springfield High School. Coach Smith came to Springfield from Tippah County, Mississippi.
Oh, Mississippi.
And he actually went to high school at Tippah County Agriculture High School. In 1923, they were the Mississippi State champs. And here's a little history lesson. Coach Smith's high school coach was a man by the name of Duke Humphreys, who was only 4 years older than him.
That's crazy.
That's crazy, isn't it? But anyway, Duke Humphreys is pretty well known in the state of Mississippi. He later became the president of Mississippi State University and the University of Wyoming. And if you ever watch a SEC basketball game, the Bulldogs actually play in the Humphreys Coliseum, which is nicknamed the Hump. So that's kind of crazy.
It is.
Coach Smith then went on to play his college football at Union University in Jackson, Tennessee. It's a Baptist-affiliated school. He's only about 50 miles from his hometown, and Coach had offers from Ole Miss and Mississippi to play, but he chose Union University, which was only 50 miles from his hometown. While Coach was at Union University in Jackson, he was interviewed back in the 70s, and he was asked a lot of questions about his time there. And he said he learned the most football from a guy by the name of Joe Guyon, who was a Chippewa Indian. They called him Big Chief. He said he taught him more football pointers than anyone. And he was, of course, coaching. He wasn't a whole lot older than Coach Smith. But when he was at Union, that's where Coach said he learned most of his football was from this guy who was outstanding, this Joe Guyon, who was called Big Chief. He's a Chippewa Indian. Later on, Big Chief was at the Carlisle School for Indians, and he actually played with a athlete by the name of Jim Thorpe. You might have heard of him. Ain't that crazy?
Might have heard that name once or twice in football life.
And of course, Jim Thorpe was the great Olympic winner, gold medal winner.
Still has an award in college football named to him to this day. Jim Thorpe Award.
And here's something else that's kind of crazy. It's got a tie to Springfield. And this might be where Coach might have got Yellow Jacket name. Anyway, Joe Guyon went on to play college football at Georgia Tech, who of course is the Yellow Jackets and called the Engineers. But when Joe Guyon played at Georgia Tech, he played for a coach by the name of John William Heisman. They've got a trophy after him.
Yes, sir. Might have heard it, the Heisman Trophy.
Wow. Isn't that crazy?
Yes, sir.
The connections, the Springfield.
And we talked about that. We talked about that, as we were talking in the early 20s, that more connections will become developed as the years go on.
Right. And the coaching tree that Coach Smith developed, it's, and to Hall of Fame coaches who went on to win state champions and so forth. It's a whole lot of history with this. Anyway, the Joe Guyon story is pretty cool right there.
Yeah, it is.
And
that's one of the coolest stories that you'll probably hear.
And he said he learned more football from him than anyone.
Well, he's a teammate of Jim Thorpe.
He must have been a heck of a player, too.
Yeah.
And, of course, he was a teammate of Jim Thorpe's at the Carlisle School, which is just unreal. You'd never dream to have all this. Okay, and Coach Smith's first year was a pretty good struggle. He finished 1-9. He had a win against somebody that we like to play and beat, and that was against Gallatin, right, Terrence?
That's all that matters.
What was the score in that one? You had that one, I thought.
Springfield beat Gallatin 6-0. in the final game of the 1928 season, which is Coach Boyce Smith's first season at Springfield High, like Chris said. And in that year, only winning one game, their opponent's record was 8-3. And the Jackets only scored 45 points that season while giving up 204 points. So not much offense was happening for him.
No, he's just getting his foundation started. Yep. And Coach Smith, of course, as we know, it gets better.
Yes, sir.
In 1929, in the second year of Coach Smith's year, it was a bad year in the country. The stock market crashed, and it was the Great Depression of 1929 and began. But football was still being played, and the Jackets defeated Franklin, Kentucky. Actually, they tied Franklin, Kentucky, 6-6. And I even have that they blocked a punt and recovered at the 6-yard line for a score.
That's details right there.
Wow, that's details for 1929 and, of course, the Great Depression. Then they went to Orlando, and Orlando beat the Jackets. Coach Boyce Smith's Jackets 7-6. Springfield took an early lead in the second half, and then Orlando intercepted a Springfield pass. And Orlando scored on a 35-yard run by Harold Stark. That might be somebody's grandfather, great-grandfather. That's pretty cool. I know there's a lot of Starks up there. I know some. And that's pretty cool that was documented back in 1929. And a lot of this stuff is probably documented by Coach Smith, who was known to keep his games and keep score and stuff if it wasn't in the newspaper at that time. So he probably reported on that himself. Probably didn't want to. It was a loss.
Yeah.
But he did keep up with his scores over the years. Then the Jackets played Franklin, Tennessee to a 0-0 tie. And this is the first name that I'm in the Boyce Smith era that was a good ball player, was Russell McCracken. Also, Fred Smith was a leading rusher for the Jackets at that time. And the fourth game of the season, the Jackets went to Columbia, Tennessee, and lost 25-0. And the Lions blocked a punt in the first half to score. And they also had several scores in the second half. In the fifth ball games, Clarksville was played against the Jackets on a wet field at Springfield, with the Jackets coming away with the win 7-0. Springfield scored in the fourth period when Fred Smith hit Russell McCracken on a pass play, and it set up a short run for a touchdown in the ball game, and the extra point was good, and the Jackets led 7-0 and went on to hold on to win 7-0. The sixth ball game of Coach Smith's second season was a 6-6 tie with Goodlettsville, and then against Murfreesboro there was a win 7-0, and then Peabody, Terrence, this is cool. It was a tie on November the 28th, 1929. The game was played in rain and slush.
Wow.
Always, how much fun is it to play football in the rain and in the slush?
And
right after Thanksgiving. Yeah, and of course the season started a lot later back then because of the heat and everything. It probably ought to start later now, but of course it starts way early now since then. The last ball game was a win against Gallatin, 7-0, and that closed out the 1929 season for Coach Smith in his second season.
And I'm sitting here looking, you got articles all over the place here. I'm sitting here looking at the newspaper article from the Robertson County Times. It's about the 1929. Like you said, it started later. We're sitting here looking at August 29th, 1929. The Jackets are just getting ready for camp. Not ready for the season. They're just not getting ready for camp. And then you got another one here, Thursday, September 12th, 1929. The Springfield High School Yellow Jackets have high hopes for a winning football combination this fall. Coach Smith has the largest number of candidates out that the high school has ever had in the years. Some 36 candidates have already reported for duty, amongst which are 12 lettermen. The jacket machine will be developed from the following, and they go on to name all the guys, but that's September 12th, and Springfield football now, September 12th, you're looking maybe week 4.
Here's why. I'm old enough to remember this, Terrence. Even when we started school, when I was in school, a lot of times they would delay the opening because of tobacco cutting. And I grew up on a tobacco farm right here where we're sitting. I used to walk up and down. This was our tobacco patch right here. And back then, they delayed school a lot of times. And of course, it was the heat, and college, their games didn't start till late. It's late in September, usually the last week in September, around that. But like you said, now it's the second week in August sometimes, and they actually go to camp in July, which is kind of crazy, but that's the way it is.
And we sat there looking, they were excited by Coach Smith having the most players he ever had. 36.
All right.
36 jackets.
And this is for 1930, right?
Yep.
We know why he was excited, because you know what? He finished 7-1-2 in this year. In this third season at Springfield, 7-1-2. He only had one loss, and that's starting to be a good year. I also have, he elected his captain before the year was Robert Holman, and then the season started with a victory, 7-0 over Franklin, Kentucky. And even have who scored, Dub Simpkins scored on the first drive of the game in the second half. And he scored for the Jackets' only score to go up 7-0. The second game, Coach Smith kind of got his offense to rolling. They defeated Ashland City 64-0. Not a lot's written about this game. It says a lot of reserves played. 64-0 is a pretty good score. Getting your offense on the roll, isn't it, Terrence?
Yeah, it is.
That old single wing was putting out some points back in 1930.
Now as we get into 1931, sitting here, of course, going through Chris great stuff again. And as I'm saying, injury-worried 31 squad, Jackets dumped Dixon 52-0. But before we get into the schedule, I have something here on September 17th, 1931. Coach Smith is sending the Yellow Jackets through daily drills. With only 8 to 9 men of the reserve list, Coach Smith worries about injuries. Robert Walling has been moved to center. The two red-headed boys, Edwin and John L. Benton, are waging a battle for the vacant tackle position. That's something right there. September 17, 1931. Coach Smith only got 8 or 9 reserves, and he got them down there in the bottom running through drills.
Yeah, but he's got 2 red-headed boys, and they're mean.
Yeah.
Anyway, but injuries, it plays a part in football, and Coach was worried about it back in 1931, like you said, Terrence. And the makings of that year was going to start off kind of rough as they tied DuPont 0-0 in the opener. But the Jackets rode with 3 wins over Ashland City, Dixon, and Franklin, Tennessee. And then they had a win at Franklin, Tennessee. The 2 losses were to Peabody and Gallatin. And they also lost to Clarksville 20-13. And that was the 3rd loss of the year. And, of course, the tie against DuPont in the opener to close out the 1931 season 5-3-1. Moving along to 1932, this is probably, in the long history other than the first 2 seasons, one of the losing seasons that Coach had. I think he had 2 losing seasons, maybe 3 in 43 years coaching. So that's crazy, isn't it? But in 1932, it was a rough year. They had a 4-5-1 record, and then they lost to DuPont 12-0 in the opener. But they picked up their first win with a 6-0 win over Ashland City. And then they defeated Bell High of Adams 32-6. And then Barnett and Miller had 3 TDs in that ball game as the Jackets rolled over Bell School. In Franklin, Tennessee, the Jackets won 20-0 with Barnett Miller and Wilson Trevathan having outstanding plays in that ball game, as the Jackets tied Columbia 6-6, and Clarksville defeated the Jackets 7-0, despite the outstanding defensive play of Mutt Hancock. He had a outstanding game. With a name like that, you got to be bad.
Got to.
I heard that. All right. And then they closed out the year losing 3 consecutive losses to Murfreesboro, Peabody, and Gallatin to finish 4-5-1. But what Coach Smith taught a lot about was sportsmanship, and they won the Little Tennessee Conference Sportsmanship Trophy in 1932.
And I'm reading here, sportsmanship is awarded to the Yellow Jackets for the 3rd time in 5 years. Says a lot.
That says a lot about the character that Coach taught back in the day.
Now we're moving on to 1933. October 5th, 1933, the Springfield High School Yellow Jackets opened the football season on the local field Friday afternoon with DuPont High and lost 6-0. I'll let you get into it, Chris, but I think it's even funny there. Open the season on the local field. That's what we called it right now in 1933.
It wasn't Boyce Smith Field at the time, but he's only that's his fifth season.
Yeah. Can't give him the farm.
Not many people get fields named after him in 5 ball games.
Can't give him the farm yet.
But he's on his way, that's for sure. And like you said, the 6-0 loss to DuPont, and I think that's the first loss we had against them. And DuPont was really a strong team at that time. And the Jackets, they went on to defeat Ashland City 12-0. They beat Bell 63-0, and the reserves played a whole second half. And the debut in the second half of a gentleman by the name of Hugh Carroll, who was part of probably the first superstars at Springfield High School. Wow. Hugh Carroll debuted in the second half as a reserve, and he had a 52-yard touchdown run. Remember that name. You'll be hearing it a lot here in the next few seasons. Of course, Hugh Carroll is in the High School Hall of Fame at Springfield, and he was a super ball player, but I guess he might have been a sophomore at this time.
1933, we get our first glimpse of a superstar at Springfield High School.
Right.
And throughout the years, of course, we've had plenty.
That's exactly right.
That will go down in the books as the first one.
That's exactly right. The Jackets defeated Columbia 7-0, and James Randolph had a 50-yard run in the fourth quarter. No relation to me. My dad's name is James, but he was later. I don't know if I'm related to him. I'd like to know. I hadn't done the family tree enough that far down. I'd like to find out, but he had a 50-yard run for the Jackets and that 7-0 win. And the Jackets in Clarksville, they had a tough ball game against one another, finishing in a 0-0 tie. And I don't know if there was a lot of scoring to be had in that ball game. Apparently it wasn't.
I'm sorry, looking at an article from that game. One of the most interesting games ever played on the Springfield field was witnessed by a large crowd Friday afternoon. Coach McDaniel's boys of Clarksville High played Boyce Smith's outfit of Springfield. The game ended in a deadlock 0-0.
That's cool. And the games were in the afternoon at that time. Yep. Springfield didn't have lights at that time. And most schools didn't. There were some, and I think we'll even get to the first night game Springfield ever played in as we move along. But 0-0 deadlock against the Wildcats at Springfield. That's pretty wild. And then we went on to defeat Gullisville 28-0, and the whole student body was in attendance. I guess it was after school.
Yeah.
They used to do that with the wrestling. I think they still do that, don't they? Where
they do in-school
wrestling, and all the kids get to watch one another.
That's crazy. Imagine an in-school football game. That's crazy.
Well, it couldn't have it at night. No lights then, unless they pull them Model Ts around the field and turn the headlights on. That wouldn't work, I don't guess. Anyway, the Jackets lost to Murfreesboro. The standouts for the Jackets in that ball game, despite the loss, were Harry Bigger and Leonard White and Jimmy Long. The loss put the Jackets in gear to go to Peabody and get a win 36-0. The standouts in that ball game were Edward Benton, James Randolph, Red White, Paul Trevathan, and Harry Biggers. And then the last ball game of the year was against Gallatin. As we said, that's always usually the last ball game in the 30s. The Jackets unfortunately lost to the Wave 25-12, and that was their third loss on the year, as the Jackets finished 1933 6-3-1.
A few things you said here in 33. You talked about that game being played against Goodlettsville in the afternoon. I'm sitting here reading November 16, 1933. Springfield defeated the team from Goodlettsville Friday afternoon by a score of 28-0, with the entire student body of Springfield High in attendance. This is you said. A parade just before the game, led by the school band, added enthusiasm to the event. Ain't that something there?
Football, we can see, is starting to catch on, and it's a big part of every little small town America at the time. And of course, here in Springfield, it was really taking off. And we'll be hearing, as we go along, some unbelievable amount of folks at games and all kinds, like you said, marching bands and so forth.
And I think the city of Springfield started to see it, because here, October 12, 1933, the Springfield City Commission has erected a new athletic grandstand at the high school.
Seats. That's the first seats.
To provide seats for all cash customers. The Yellow Jackets came through victorious last Friday in that game against Ashland City, but they were here October 12th, 1933. The City Commission erected a new grandstand at Springfield High School. Ain't that something?
I think if I remember right, I think that it was 50 cents maybe to get in the game, or 25.
50 cents.
50 cents to get in the ball game. And that's the first seats they had at Springfield. And I know at one time, like you've reported, that the field went the opposite way.
Yep.
And I think it was still at that time going north and south, which of course Boyce Smith Field the last years was east and west. The end zones went from east to west, or west to east, however you want to say it. From the swimming pool to the street. How about that?
The swimming pool to the street.
You old enough to remember the swimming pool?
No, not even.
Man, I'm old.
From the swimming pool to the street, as you say, but that would be the cap on 1933.
Moving along in 1934, the Jackets finished 7-1-2. They gave up only 19 points all season long, and the 19 points was in one game.
Wow.
That's pretty wild. They started off the season in a 0-0 tie in a steady downpour, as the Jackets and Bulldogs fought to a 0-0 tie in the opener. And then Ashland City was next, and the Jackets won 26-0. As Hugh Carroll ran for the first Jacket touchdown. And he also had a touchdown pass to Hewlin Draper in the ball game. Hugh Carroll, of course, is a future star, as you'll be hearing more about him as the season went along. They went on to play Bell School and defeated them 41-0. As Hugh Carroll and Hewlin Draper, they had some outstanding games in that, scoring TDs for the Jackets, multiple TDs. Also a 6-0 win at Franklin, and not a whole lot written about couple of these games. They defeated Columbia 7-0. It says Leonard Wilson scored for the Jackets, and Billy Young kicked the extra point. That's kind of the first extra point I remember being kicked. A lot of the extra points were runs. And at that time, there wasn't 2-point conversion.
Yeah.
You ran, you got one. And that didn't change, I don't think, until 1969 when they put the 2-point conversion into the game. Then moving right along in a defensive ball game, Springfield defeated Clarksville. We'll take it 2-0. And Hugh Carroll had the longest run in the battle for 38 yards. But the Springfield safety was scored when Clarksville fumbled in their end zone, and it was recovered by nobody other than Hugh Carroll. Standouts for the Jackets were Harry Biggers and Leonard White. 14-0 Goodlettsville victory as Billy Young passed to Hugh Carroll for his first TD, and Leonard Wilson scored on a powerful run on the goal line for the Jackets as they won 14-0. The next game was a 0-0 tie against Murfreesboro Central, and there's no information on that one. And the only loss of the season was the 19-12 game against Peabody. There's not any information on that. It'd be interesting to hear how that game went because it was only loss, but unfortunately it wasn't reported on, and it had a victory for Peabody 19-12 as the Jackets give up their first loss and their first points on the season. They kept their scoreless streak going the next week as the Jackets defeated Gallatin 6-0 on Thanksgiving before more than 2,000 fans at Springfield. Isn't that wild?
That's crazy. That's nice. In 1934?
That's correct. 1934. Not a whole lot to do. Maybe go to the picture show.
Yeah.
Probably cost a dime at that time. But anyway, that's kind of wild. 2,000 fans at the ball game. I bet Springfield wasn't 3,000 to 4,000 people living there then. I know I'm not. That's not certain, but I know it wasn't a very big town at that time, and 2,000 people at a football game. The All Little Tennessee Conference, who the Jackets were a member of, team was released in 1934, and Hugh Carroll made the All Little Tennessee Conference team, and only 2 starters will be lost to graduation, so the future looks bright for 1935 for the Jackets.
And I'm sitting there looking at November 22nd, 1934, and like you said, it was after the Peabody game, and it states here in the Robeson County Times, those teams that will be playing on a local field are Gallatin and Springfield playing in their annual Thanksgiving game. The Yellow Jackets are completing a season which they started for the most part with a green, inexperienced team. Nevertheless, only Peabody was able to defeat them and score on them all season. In conjunction with the game, the high school and the citizens of Springfield are celebrating Yellow Jacket Day in honor of the team and Coach Boyce Smith, now completing his 6th year here. The game and accompanying events are being broadcasted by the way of WSIX radio and announcer Hardin Khan by a proclamation from Mayor John E. Garner.
Sure, the street's named after him, probably.
Yeah.
Also,
all businesses, houses in the city will close. This program is being sponsored by the Rotary, Kiwanis, and B&PW clubs.
Isn't that wild? They shut down the stores.
Shut down Springfield to see Springfield play Gallatin on Thanksgiving in 1934.
That's
cool. It gives you chills, type of stuff like that, man. It's just shut the whole town down, meet you at the field, Springfield versus Gallatin.
All right. That's wild. It really is.
And that's the game you said had the 2,000 people, correct?
Right. That's right. And it was on the radio, WSIX, which originally started here. It's still a radio station in Nashville at the time. And I guess that was the first game that was actually on WSIX. I think in some of the photographs I have, you spotted that. You remember seeing
Yep, the little truck.
the little truck with WSIX on there.
Yep,
That's cool, man.
And as the season, the season approaches, we're kind of giving you a build up now. We're giving you history. We're going to probably give you this history. We'll probably span out clean into the 2024 season. It'll go into the 2024 season, but you'll start to see more photos and things come out, and a lot of this stuff is going to blow your mind.
Yeah, it's unreal how the game has took off from as we go along with the history on the popularity of football itself, especially high school football. And in the 1935 season, Coach Smith was looking forward to a good team, and I think he did. He accomplished that.
Yes, sir, he did. I'm looking at here right now. 1935, first Smith team to go undefeated.
Absolutely. The first unbeaten team for Coach Boyce Smith. Many more were to come as the Jackets went 9-0 in 1935. They started with a win over DuPont 13-6, and it was the first time in 5 outings that we defeated DuPont, which later on the Jackets dominated. Hugh Carroll returned a punt 65 yards for the Jackets in the ball game, and Hewlin Draper scored in the fourth quarter as the Jackets went on to defeat DuPont 13-6.
And that should give you an indication there, because like you said, we hadn't beat them in 5 years, just right out beat them. That might have been an early sign of we might have something here. And I'm sitting there looking, September 15, 1935. Regulars and recruits make strong bid on SHS 11. 23 young athletes are striving for coveted position on Coach Smith's 1935-11. That's funny they called it 11. Not the team, it's 11. A large number of last year's regulars are back and will make the sledding tough for new applicants. Hugh Carroll, diminutive back, will likely be in his old place of running back, punts. Hardin Khan, and it just goes on name after name. Harold Walker, George E. Glover, Gene Ryan, Elmer Butt. I mean, you got names that you're going to probably mention here as the season goes on, but
absolutely, you mentioned one for sure, George E. Glover, the tandem of George E. Glover and Hugh Carroll. Ooh, the mighty atom, called, I think, George E. Glover or Hugh Carroll, one or the other. But as we go along, you'll hear about that. Those two were dynamic.
And still, September 15th, like I said, at this point in 1935, season still isn't starting until late September, early October.
That's, again, with the heat, and football just started later then. And, of course, we mentioned the tobacco thing here, too. Had a lot to do with that. But the Jackets going to start off pretty strong at Ashland City with a 53-0 win. Hugh Carroll had a 25-yard punt return. The second team played most of the second half, and in the second half, a name that you're going to be hearing a lot about got into the ball game, and his name was George E. Glover. He raced 50 yards with a punt return for a touchdown and ended up with 4 TDs. That's a pretty good debut, I would say. The next ball game for the Jackets, they play Bell School of Adams, and they win 60-0. There was no information on the ball game there. They defeated Franklin, Tennessee, 45-0, and they defeated Franklin with Hugh Draper getting the scoring started with a 5-yard touchdown run. Hugh Carroll and Hewlin Draper continued the touchdown spree in the second half. And also George Glover had 2 more touchdowns for the Jackets in the 45-0 victory over Franklin, Tennessee. The next ball game was a tight one against Mid-State powerhouse Columbia. The Jackets defeated Columbia, though, 7-6. When Draper had a punt blocked, it was returned for a touchdown by Columbia. and they went up 6-0, which is rare for this ball club. And also in the first quarter, Springfield scored on a Hugh Carroll pass to Hewlin Draper for the touchdown, and Hugh Carroll ran for the point after attempt, and it was the difference in the ball game as Springfield defeated Columbia 7-6.
I'm sitting here looking at this at 35. December 5th, 1935. Smith has inevitable record for his 7 years as Springfield coach. Teams have scored 1,165 points to opponents' 321 points in 69 games. Coach Smith has consistently turned out good teams. The most successful team has just been completed, with the Jackets winning all 9 of their games in 1935. Of the 69 games thus far, players under his coaching, Springfield has won 45, lost 14, and tied 10.
That's stout, as we say in the country. That's stout. And it continues. The next ball game was in front of about 3,000 fans witnessed the Springfield-Clarksville game as the Jackets win 19-6 over the Wildcats. The Jackets scored twice in the first and went on for the 19-6 victory. Before the game, the Clarksville newspaper, this is where it gets, the rivalry starts. Yeah. The Clarksville newspaper, it was reported, said Springfield lucked out on last year's game and Springfield was overrated. And after this ball game, the Springfield paper said, well, their band was good. It continues today, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Not so much for, I don't know that, Clarksville, they play all their city schools. Yeah. And that's big rivalry. But for us, it's still a big ball game.
It is. And, of course, last year we got a trophy created for that game.
Yeah. That's awesome. You got that going. You had a lot to do with that.
Yep. And I think it's now going to turn the tide of getting that rivalry back how it's supposed to be, specifically with, like you said, Clarksville playing all their own city schools. So, only time they leave the city of Clarksville now is to play the mighty Springfield Yellow Jackets. And they got the Jackets number last year. And
they did. And
this time will go around, the Jackets have a little more experience than Clarksville do. And I think that'll be the only game Clarksville leaves the city of Clarksville to play this year is when they come to Springfield to play the Jackets in week 2.
You're right. And I'm not just patting myself on the back, but before the season started, I thought they might go undefeated, but they would lose their first round in the playoff, and it happened.
Exactly what they did.
It did. They, unfortunately, we lost, but they went on to have an undefeated team, and then they lost in the first round to the 4th place team. So that's the way it was, And as we're doing this, we're watching an old Springfield Clarksville film.
Yeah, we are. And the game, what year is this we're watching right now?
This is 1963, and they're lining up to kick the extra point, which decides a game, and he misses it, I think.
And all you see is it said
he missed it. It was
missed wide. It wide right.
Yeah, I hope they didn't try to claim that one was good like they did in 67. And I hope they don't hear that.
This is at Boyce Smith Field, and there's bleachers in the end zone still. And like you said, we've seen, there's what do they call it coming off the goalpost right here?
What now?
What they got hanging off the goalpost?
Crepe paper.
Got paper hanging off the bottom of the goalpost.
You're not old enough.
And I would love for Coach Wilson to see this and tell him, hey, let's put some crepe paper on the goalpost.
I don't think he'd go for that, but I think it's probably against the rules now.
To show school spirit, man.
They done that up until the 70s, though. I remember them doing that up until the 70s. It's probably illegal now, but that's cool, though, isn't it?
It is.
Show you spirit. And we're sitting here watching that as I'm sitting here reading about a Clarksville and a Springfield game in 1935. All right, we're on the move on turn, so I'm going to go to the Murfreesboro game, and the Jackets continue their undefeated ways. they defeat Murfreesboro 53-0. And John Garner, the mayor, declared it Yellow Jacket Day on the last home game for Springfield as they rode 53-0 over Murfreesboro. And that's all that was on that game. And that leads us to 1935 continuing. The Jackets head to Gouletsville down the ridge and have a win, 26-0. Nothing.
You got it right, 23-0, 26-0.
26-0 as Hewlin Draper had 3 touchdowns in the ball game. And the last ball game of the year is against Gallatin. And the Jackets are 9-0, and they play Gallatin at Gallatin and defeat Gallatin 40-0, and they are the Little Tennessee Conference champions in 1935. 9-0. That right there was a strong team in 1935, of course, with Hugh Carroll and George E. Glover leading the way for that ball club. And the Jackets are on the road right now.
Yeah, and Coach Boyce Smith has his first undefeated season. Hasn't been in Springfield too long, and finally, instant taste of success. And then we head on here to 1936, right?
1936, and the Jackets finish 8-1. They open up against Portland with a 52-0 victory. There's no information on that one. Probably wasn't a whole lot to report except a lot of touchdowns. And the second game was the same way as the Jackets defeated Ashland City 65-0. The next ball game, I think this is a key to this year, is when the Isaac Litton series started in 1936. And Isaac Litton, if you're not familiar with Isaac Litton, it was a huge rivalry with Springfield. It's over in Englewood, Madison, and it's right on Gallatin Road. It was a huge high school, especially compared to Springfield High School. And this is a time when the Nashville newspapers were kind of saying, well, Springfield, they don't get as much recognition because they play smaller schools. Well, Coach Smith decided to put Isaac Litton, which was a premier high school over in Nashville at the time, on his schedule. And the first time the Jackets played Isaac Litton, they were a 25-0 winner on a muddy field as the Jackets rode over the Litton lines. The end runs of Hugh Carroll, and George E. Glover, and the power running of Hewlin Draper were too much for the Lions. In the first meeting between the schools, Carroll had beautiful runs of 20, 30, 40, and 60 yards. That's a pretty good night, Terrence.
Yeah, it is.
Mm-hmm. The Jackets' next ball game was against Franklin, Tennessee, and there's no information on it, but the Jackets rolled 52-0 over Franklin, Tennessee.
In the Robeson County Times on October 30th, 1936, they wrote, Springfield will play Clarksville Thursday night instead of Friday as first plan on account of the teachers' meeting in Nashville. This is the first night game Springfield will have played and is looked upon with some concern. They go on to talk about Hugh Carroll, the promising All-American quarterback, and George E. Glover, the promising All-American halfback. Talk about how they will be fighting, have their fighting cloths on, so they'll be ready for their game against Clarksville. They talked about that, and they talked about how Springfield beat Clarksville and went into detail about that. And as you said, Springfield came with this 14-7 win over the Wildcats in 1936.
Yeah, big ball game again with Clarksville. There's been a few of them even up till 1936, and that was a good win for the Jackets. The Jackets played Gouletsville after the Clarksville battle, and they defeated the Trojans 19-0. Unfortunately, the Jackets failed in their first ball game of the season against the Murfreesboro Central Tigers, and they lost that one in a tight one, 6-0. as they finish up till their next to last ball game, and Gallatin is next.
Gallatin. On the paper here for the Robertson County Times, November 12th, 1936. I just love how they're so detailed in the times in the 30s and give you every detail you want to hear. But here's
detailing the times of the time.
They are. And here's it. I'm going to give you a rundown of November 12th, 1936 in Robertson County Times. Yellow Jackets Day to be held on November 25th. The funds raised by the sale of tickets to the game between Springfield and Gallatin will be used to buy new band uniforms. A committee has been appointed to arrange details for the event. They are as follows: Miss Louise Cobbs, Dr. Robert DeBerry, Robert H. Bell, and Turnley Rudolph. The Yellow Jackets have not lost a game this year. That was, of course, the week before they went down to Murfreesboro.
Right.
November 19th, 1936. Yellow Jacket Day to be a gala event. Band has new uniforms. Got those taken care of. Mayor proclaims a holiday. For the first time, Superintendent Young announces that Yellow Jacket Day will be complete in every detail. Every civil club, business house, and citizen will heed the proclamation issued by the mayor declaring November 25th part holiday from the hours of 2:30 p.m. until 4:30 p.m. The Yellow Jackets play Gallatin on the local field. Still no name on the field yet. The admission is 50 cents for adults and 25 cents for children. Superintendent Young is desirous of having the largest gate receipts in the history of the school next Wednesday.
And you know what comes out of that? I can't believe how much the band uniforms have went up. You got a whole band uniforms
in a week.
And it's 50 cents and 25 to get in the game. I tell you, the price of inflation. Wow.
November 26, 1936. Annual clash between Gallatin and SHS, a spectacle. The final score was 18-7 in favor of the Yellow Jackets. Yellow Jacket Day was a huge success. The parade started from the junior high on Lucas Street, came up Fifth Avenue to the square. From there, they moved down Main Street, then back down to the avenue to the football field. On the field, Gallatin and Springfield met in a staring football clash that had all the color that goes with the grand old game. It appears that the individual who wrote this article got carried away and had little to say about the game. We have only the score to report. As the dusty shades of the late November fell over the field, a tinge of sadness crept the hearts of all, for each knew that they would never again be able to experience such thrills. Of course, each one hopes to see again the colorful cycle of the autumnal equinox. This is deep.
Hey man, he's a poet and don't know.
Yes, and experience anew the sheer happiness of a sharp, cold November breeze. Each one hopes to cheer again as Gallant football team wearing the gold and white dashes around the end or bucks the line for the 5-yard gain.
He's a poet and don't know it. He wrote more about the leaves on the tree than he did the ball game, didn't he, Terrence?
Sure did. But the Jackets finished that season in 1936, 8-1, with capping that season off with an 18-7 Jacket Day win at the Springfield local field. That's what they'll call it.
Yes. And we'll get to a name on that before long. That's pretty good season. One loss to Murfreesboro Central, but the Jackets are continuing to be tough as the Boyce Smith era continues to chug on down the line.